Good evening. It's now 6 o'clock, and I'm handing over to Dr. Sade Briet. Dr. Briet, over to you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, SAMA members, JUDASA members, and all friends and supporters of the South African Medical Association. My name is Sade Briet, and I am the Vice Chairperson of the Junior Doctors Association of South Africa, or JUDASA, which is a subsection of SAMA. I am also a community service doctor, currently working at Helderberg Hospital in the Western Cape. And tonight, I have the privilege of being your host for this webinar entitled The Science Behind Healthy Food. As a reminder, before we start, please make use of the Q&A function to ask all of your questions. Please don't raise your hands during the session, since this would be ignored. However, we do encourage you to participate in the Q&A at the end of the session. Again, use the Q&A function because we will miss it if you send it in the chat function. As an overview of tonight's session, we are going to be looking at 5 specific aspects. Most of us are aware that poor dietary habits are a leading cause of obesity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and even certain cancers. The Global Burden of Disease Collaboration estimated in 2021 that more than 7 million deaths worldwide were linked to dietary risk factors. So with this in mind, the role of nutrition in public health and prevention of diseases cannot be overstated. By leveraging the latest research and insights, Discovery Vitality has created an environment that not only motivates healthier behavior, but also makes it easier for members to stick to these changes over the long term. And so the 5 aspects that we will be looking at includes the drivers and health impact of unhealthy diets, asking the question, but what is a healthy diet? Third, we'll be looking at the science behind Vitality Healthy Food Benefits. Then we'll be looking at the impact of the healthy food benefit. And then lastly, the strategies to promote healthy eating at an individual, community, and government level. We are honored this evening to be joined by a renowned speaker, and this is my favorite part of tonight, where I get to have the honor of introducing her. So our speaker this evening is Carla Poole. Carla is a registered dietitian and currently leads the nutrition strategy for Discovery Vitality Wellness. She has a decade's experience in the private health insurance industry and holds a master's degree in public health specializing on health systems from UCT, as well as honors degrees in physiology and nutrition and dietetics. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Carla. We are honored to have you here, and I'm going to hand over to you now.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be able to share the work that we do. Just want to check that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. So we'll be speaking about the science of healthy eating, particularly the work that we do within Discovery Vitality, but I thought it would be good just to give context and a framework to the work that we do. So the World Health Organization and the Oxford Alliance has this 4-4-60 model that they use to describe the importance of a healthy lifestyle. So we know that there are 4 main lifestyle risk factors: so physical inactivity, a poor diet, smoking, and alcohol abuse, or how much alcohol you use. Those 4 lifestyle risk factors alone lead to 4 of the chronic conditions, like we mentioned: lung disease, diabetes, cancers, and heart disease. And these 4 conditions can be attributed to 60% of deaths worldwide, which is about 41 million deaths globally relating to chronic conditions. And we also know from the emerging evidence that mental health or stress and sleep actually complicate this picture even further. So a healthy lifestyle is pivotal to preventing these chronic conditions of lifestyle. But we know that the situation is exacerbating. The trends are moving in the wrong direction. So that is part of the Vitality program. I want to take you through the building blocks of how we think about health using the 4-4-60 model to prevent chronic conditions. And it's based on behavioral economic principles, which looks at and describes why we don't act rationally. So we might have all of the right information, but it doesn't translate into healthy behaviors. So the pillars that we use in Vitality to help our members, so at the core of it, Vitality is a health promotion program, incentivizing people to take charge of their health and to lead healthy lives. So the first pillar is to get members to know and understand their health through various screenings, like the Vitality Age Questionnaire, which is a health risk assessment questionnaire, to do health checks that assesses their weight assessment, glucose, blood pressure, cholesterol, and to declare their smoking status. We also have incentives for them to get vaccinated. Then we want to improve their health through physical activity, nutrition, and mental well-being. And they can earn points and status. So the program is gamified using those principles of behavioral economics to motivate them to do the right behaviors. And then they get rewarded through a whole host of benefits. I won't go through all of these in detail. I think it's important just to position the program that we have and the levers that we use within the nutrition portfolio to have a overview of this slide and of the program. So to bring it back to nutrition, globally, what we see is that people do not adhere to dietary guidelines. 4 out of 10 people do not adhere to their national dietary guidelines. And just for context, so each country has their own guidelines where they implement the latest science and evidence for their country's specific context. So to make sure that the guidelines are appropriate for their population, for their specific country's context, and also the health priorities. And I'll show you the South African guidelines on one of the next slides. But globally, what we're seeing is that people are under consuming fruits and vegetables. So according to the World Health Organization, the recommendation is to at least consume 400 grams of fruits and vegetables per day, which equates to about 5 servings of 80 grams each. And South Africans consume 43% less fruits and vegetables than that recommended amount. And you can see a similar trend in the UK. On the other side, we overconsume salt and sugar, which are key nutrients of concern when looking at chronic conditions. And you can see there again, overconsuming alongside the UK, up to 70% more salt and 82% more sugar than what is recommended to maintain health. And this increases the risks of health significantly, like we mentioned in the introduction. The Global Burden of Diseases study attributes over 7 million deaths from diet-related risks. And the main contributing factors in the diet is a high sodium intake, low fruit and vegetable intake, and a low whole grain intake. And all of those, so fruits and vegetables, whole grains, they are key for promoting health. And sodium has a lot of health implications, especially when we look at hypertension. So over 1 billion adults globally may be obese by 2030 if the current trends hold true. So you can see in 2010, 11% of the world was obese, and by 2030, that might increase to 18% if our interventions aren't effective. And in South Africa, so we understand that obesity contributes and increases the risk for chronic conditions. In South Africa, our trends from 1997 to 2018, we see a 59% increase in the chronic conditions that directly relate to our dietary habits. So these are our food-based dietary guidelines. there are a few things that I want to highlight on this slide. So our guidelines were last updated in 2013. So these are the latest that we have. I have heard that we are working on new food-based dietary guidelines. Other countries publish every 5 years. Others do take about 10 or more years to update theirs. So our guidelines are to enjoy a variety of foods, be active, make starchy foods part of most meals, eat plenty of fruits and vegetables every day, eat dried beans, split peas, lentils, and soya regularly, have milk, mass, yogurt every day. Fish, chicken, lean meat, or eggs can be eaten daily. Drink lots of clean, safe water. Use fat sparingly. Choose vegetable oils rather than the hard fats. Use sugar and foods and drinks high in sugar sparingly. And use salt and food high in salt sparingly. What's important here is that our food-based dietary guidelines, as I mentioned, each dietary guideline is adapted to the country that they are for. So in our case, you'll notice that the language is very easy to understand. We have many languages, so it was important to have this in a language that can be understood by everyone. So plain, simple language, and also not very prescriptive on the amounts. So you'll see things like it can be eaten every day, you can have this, rather use these kind of foods sparingly, and that's all very intentional and very important to relate it back to the population that they are for. You'll see the pictures that we use to describe the food-based dietary guidelines are also very easy, regularly consumed foods within our country, and all of these are very important when it comes to educating the population on these guidelines. So what is a healthy diet? Up front, there are many different ways to visualize this and explain it. In our recent white paper looking at the healthy food benefit that we have within Discovery, we use this plate model to describe the principles of what a healthy diet is. So half your plate should be fruits or vegetables, if you're looking at your main meal here. A quarter of it can be whole grains or high fiber starchy foods, and then a quarter should be diverse protein sources. So at a high level, this is how you want your plate to look, especially in a South African context. I find this plate model, the visual of this, quite helpful, because I find in a lot of the communities that we have, pak will form the basis of the meal, but it would cover the entire plate, and then other foods will go on top. So you should have plenty of fruits and vegetables, as we said, about 5 servings of fruits and veg per day. And I'll show you what a serving can look like visually. Legumes, so beans, peas, lentils, and soya products are incredibly important source of fiber and healthy proteins. And globally, and in South Africa, we are not eating enough of this food group. So it is something that should be championed. It's very economic and very, very healthy and often overlooked. Then healthy fats are an important part of the diet. It's one of the macronutrients. The evidence shows that if you swap out the unhealthy fats for these healthy fat sources, there are significant health benefits. So things like avocado, fish, nuts, and your vegetable oils are very important. Whole grains and high fiber starches include things like whole grains, rice, oats, etc. And these are low in salt, sugar, and saturated fats, but a really good source of fiber, which is very important, as well as lots of key vitamins, minerals, and fiber and protein. Then dairy can be included in the diet. In South Africa, in particular, it provides a lot of gap nutrients, so nutrients that are lacking in the South African diet. Dairy plays a very important role. And then you can use diverse protein sources. So animal protein might be very popular, but there are other healthy alternatives as well that should be included, like seafood, lean meats, poultry, eggs, nuts, and seeds. So when we speak about nutrition education and translating the evidence that we have, there are a few ways that you can communicate. You can either speak about food specifically, or whole foods like we have now in the top section of the slide, or you can identify nutrients of interest. So things that you want to look out for, like cutting down on added sugars, making sure you choose foods that are high in fiber. You might want to look at the sodium or salt for hypertensive patients. Those you need a bit more understanding from the patient to be able to read food labels, etc. So in general, it's much easier to explain food-based guidelines instead of looking at specific nutrients. Another way to explain what healthy diet or what a healthy diet is, shortly after we published our white paper, the World Health Organization came out with this statement as well from their side to say the basic building blocks of a healthy diet is that the diet should be adequate, so providing all essential nutrients, and there's no one food group that can do this. You need to eat a variety, so you want to promote health without going into excess. The diet needs to be balanced, so you want to balance the energy intake and to promote healthy weight and growth, but prevent disease. It should be moderate, so moderate consumption of foods and nutrients, and then also diverse, so a variety of nutritious food across all of the food groups. And then what I really like is that they added this graphic that shows you the ranges, because I find that a lot of the fad diets that we're seeing coming out now leans to an extreme on either of these macronutrients. So I really like that they put this out there to say that for protein, there is a healthy range. You don't have to worry about the percentages, but just to understand that there are pros and cons, so risks of taking it to an extreme. So you really need to find the balance. A dietitian can help you do this. But if you consume too little protein, you can become deficient in amino acids. If you eat too much, there's a metabolic burden. With fats, the same. You can have unhealthy weight gain if you consume too much, but you can also become deficient if you cut it out completely. And then with carbohydrates as well, the ranges here are 45 to 75. You can impact your blood glucose levels or become deficient in certain key vitamins and minerals if you cut it out completely. So a really nice balanced view, not going too much into the food recommendations, but I think that this is quite a helpful graphic when you zoom out to understand the importance of each of the macronutrients and what you need to aim for. So if we look at influences of healthy food purchases, there are a few frameworks that you can use to look at this. So the framework on the screen here, we're looking at what might impact an individual. The food environment itself is also quite complex and influential at the moment. So a lot of access to ultra-processed foods, cheap ultra-processed foods that are designed to be hyper-palatable. We also have access to a lot of takeout. The last stat that I saw had over 11,000 takeaway outlets in South Africa. So we have this incredible access to that. Social media and marketing influencers are also definitely weighing in on how people are choosing to buy foods. You can see it's either a true hunger that's driving food-seeking behavior. It could be psychological, such as mood, stress, so emotional reasons, economic reasons that influences food purchases. We see that a lot. So the cost of your income, the availability of foods, access to the foods, education about what is a healthy food, your skills to prepare the foods and time play a big role. And then social, our culture, how we grew up, how our family eats, how our community eats, and the meal patterns there that we've learned with and grown up with definitely plays a role. And then there are others like our attitudes, beliefs, etc. about the foods. So there are a lot of factors at play here. With Vitality, we use a shared value model. So we use this model across the business, and we drive healthy behaviors with our members, which then leads to a healthier member and lower claims for the insurance side of the business. And it also contributes to a healthier society. And we also use this then within the nutritional space. So our nutrition strategy is broader than just the healthy food benefit that I'll explain to you in a little bit. So just to give context, our strategy also includes healthy dining. So we've partnered with a few restaurants, and at those restaurants, we get the menus in the wellness team. We have dietitians and guiding principles. We identify foods that meet our criteria for a healthy meal. We identify those, and members can then see that online when they buy through Uber Eats or on the online stores. We also print a Vitality logo on the menus in the restaurants. And when members buy meals with those logos, they get cashbacks paid in miles. So we incentivize them when they're eating out. We also have a healthy food studio situated at One Discovery Place in Sandton, where we teach people how to cook, because we understand that giving them access to the healthy ingredients is just one part of the puzzle. It doesn't help that you give them a basket full of ingredients, but they don't actually have the skills and the knowledge of how to transform that into something healthy and delicious that's actually acceptable to them and that they want to eat. So the Healthy Food Studio is also a big part of the strategy. We launched Vitality Healthy Weight, which is a program that gives members access to dietitians through a digital platform. So they have the dietitians available on WhatsApp. They also get meal plans and recipes. So that's another way that we support members to reach or maintain a healthy weight. So the Healthy Food Benefit is just one of the strategies that we have to help and support our members. So getting to the Healthy Food Benefit, we have partnered with two grocery stores. The one is Woolworths and the other one is Checkers, that we brought onto the benefit in September this year. And again, we have set criteria. We implement evidence and dietary guidelines. So we look at the South African, local, and international guidelines. We also look at emerging evidence to make sure that our criteria that we apply to the Healthy Food Benefit is always up to date and something that makes sense clinically. We identify the healthiest options in each of the food groups, so we don't cut out anything. We're also brand agnostic, so we apply our nutrition criteria to the entire catalog at the partner stores. Once we've identified foods, we then have this Vitality logo, or the V indicator that you see in the middle of the slide. And this is an easily recognizable indicator to point out the healthiest food options within each of the food groups. Our members are then incentivized further by earning cashbacks to purchase these items. It helps with affordability. So we're addressing the awareness and the education by applying the logo to foods in store and online. And then they are incentivized by making it more affordable. So the benefit also requires some behavioral actions from their side. As I said, we're a health promoting program. So they need to complete a health check or a Vitality health check and do the online behavior, the Vitality age questionnaire. Once they've done both of those, they maximize the incentive that they get back, which is up to 25% if they're on Vitality. If they join Discovery Bank, that amount can increase even further, up to 75% that they then get back on the cost of the food. So it really goes a long way in addressing the issue of affordability and awareness and education. And then they can reap the rewards when they spend the Discovery miles, which is our Discovery currency. It's worth more than cash, because when they spend the miles, they also earn discounts at the rewards partners. So that's the science behind it. I did want to pause at the V indicator, because I do think that this is a key part of our strategy where we apply the science of healthy eating. So nutrition can be an incredibly complex field to manage. We won't get into too much of the details, but there's a lot of conflicting information out there. And there are also a lot of different ways and strategies that you can apply to educate and raise awareness on what is a healthy food. There are different kind of ways to label foods and to classify foods on a population level. We have currently in government, we have draft regulations on labeling foods where they want to regulate foods that are high in certain nutrients to place labels onto the food packages themselves. So that's one way that you can do it. There are also different types of labels that you can use. So the one type is where you focus on the nutrient, where food would need to be identified as high in salt or high in sugar or high in calories, or whatever is decided needs to be highlighted through regulations. Or you can do something like a summary indicator, where there are criteria in the back end, and what is consumer facing or member facing is very easy to interpret. Other examples then the V indicator would be the robot system, where you label something green, amber, or red. So it's very easy to interpret those. So our V indicator is one example of these summary indicators. So if a member is standing in front of a shelf filled with canned goods, for example, they can identify or look out for the V indicator on the shelf prices, the shelf logos, and look out for the indicator, and they know that that has met our criteria and is the healthiest option within the range that they are considering, and then buy that and earn the rewards. Then we also classify the rest of the food catalog. So we have the healthy items that we identify and label. In our backend, we also identify or classify foods that we consider neutral. So these are ones that can form part of a healthy diet, depending on the person's life stage and specific needs and activity level, etc. And then we have unhealthy foods, foods that are known very often, the ultra-processed foods that are high in salt, sugar, and fat, where if you consume too much of these, they do increase the risk of chronic conditions or non-communicable diseases. So that's how we classify the foods. Members also earn points if they buy healthy foods, and they lose some of the points when they buy the unhealthy foods within the same shopping basket, but they can't go into negative. And all of these are just some of the behavioral economics principles that we're bringing in to drive the right behavior. So the impact of the healthy food benefit, also just to note that these slides are all part of a white paper that we published. So it is available, and happy to share the link afterwards. But we have over 400,000 families or policies that are activated for the healthy food benefit. And this was as of September this year. Since bringing on Checkers, that number has increased substantially. So that number is already a bit outdated. But at the time, we had over 400,000 families benefiting from the healthy food benefit, and they earned over R1 billion back in rewards for buying the food. So that 1 billion is then cash back on 220 million items that were purchased by these policies or these families. You can see the top 10 healthy food items, mainly fruits and vegetables, with some protein in there as well, tuna, eggs, chicken, etc. And then that white plot just highlights two of the insights that we found while writing this white paper. The one is that members that are more engaged in vitality, this probably does make sense, but it was good to see it reflected in the data, that people that engage with vitality as a health promotion program, so they're exercising more, they've activated the benefits, they're doing their screenings, they're getting vaccinated, and those higher engagers tend to have a healthier food basket as well. And then looking at our population, some of the things that we noticed that could improve on the nutrition is to buy more fruits and vegetables and legumes. Again, I say a very important unsung hero. They can swap out some of their proteins for healthier options like skinless chicken instead of chicken with a skin, fish, and beans. And then the top confectionaries or the top unhealthy foods that they were buying were chocolate, sweets, and ice creams. So that just summarizes the impact as of today on of the benefit on our population. But I also wanted to show results of a study that we published in 2013. So a few years after we launched the benefit, we were, at the time, we had access to data before a member activated the benefit. And so we were able to track a cohort of people and their spending patterns for 12 months before they joined the benefit. And then once they joined the benefit, whether they were earning 10 or 25% cashback, we could then track the change in the behavior. So on this screen, you can see the results for fruits and vegetables, and then for healthy foods as a category. So all of the food groups combined. And you can see that depending on the size of the cashback that they got at that time, the behavior changed proportionally. So the higher the cashback, the higher or the bigger the change in behavior. And that was quite important. It showed that the program was driving the right rewards. Lancet also published a bigger review this year summarizing the impact of financial incentives on food purchasing behavior. And they used this study as well. But what was interesting is because of the cost associated to these kind of benefits, or the cost of doing research where you're giving free food or discounted food, a lot of those studies aren't longer than 6 months. So the fact that we have this long-term data is really helpful. We refreshed the data. We didn't publish it, but we refreshed it this year. And we found that these patterns and changes in the food basket still holds. So we do have long-term sustained behavior change because of the benefit. And then this just shows the unhealthy foods. We also track that again at that point where they activated the benefit, followed them up for 12 months, and saw that the bigger the cashback, the more the behavior changed to buy fewer of the unhealthy food items. And then the impact of the sustained behavior where they're buying healthier foods and less of the unhealthy foods. We also tracked this in terms of health outcomes, and we saw that the likelihood of being obese was 13% reduced for members that were buying more healthier foods. Blood glucose, the likelihood of having high blood glucose levels at a health check was 55% reduced. And then quite importantly, hospital admissions. We saw a 14% reduction in the risk of hospitalization for cardiometabolic diseases. So there's definitely, if you think about that shared value impact, the investment that we're making into food, almost want to say as food as medicine, or recognizing those health risks of the global burden of disease study by investing the right behaviors to correct and prevent those risks, we are seeing tangible results when it comes to intermediate health risks and hospital outcomes as well. So then we ended our white paper with a few individual interventions and then looking at the broader community. And I thought it would be interesting to expand on this slide a little bit, hoping that it could help you in your practice and maybe even on an individual level. So the steps to take for a healthier basket, again, here dietitians will be able to personalize this on a case-by-case basis. But if we just consider 5 steps broadly, it would be to set specific and realistic goals. What's very important here when it comes to behavior change and how we speak and counsel patients, we've seen much better results when we focus on the positives of what you can add to a diet instead of focusing on the things that they should restrict. If you ask them to eat more fruits and vegetables or more healthy foods that might be acceptable to them, tasty to them, and not focus too much on the things that they need to cut out. In terms of their mindset, it's a lot easier to focus on what you're gaining than what you are depriving yourself of. So when you are setting goals, it needs to be something that fits for them. It needs to be realistic. So we often use stepwise approaches, and I'll show you an example of that on sugary beverages on one of the next slides. A dietitian would be able to help with a meal plan to make the goals and the targets realistic and very detailed. So if that is possible, always refer to a dietitian for this step, and then as part of the multidisciplinary team, you can help to enforce and support those goals. Then when you are speaking about a detailed plan, it's key to start with what the person is eating already. So it's also part of making it realistic. So asking them what they eat and then making suggestions with what's feasible within there. There are often simple swaps that you can make or things that you can add to what a meal looks like, but starting with what they have and what is acceptable to them is the best way to start. It's also a very social thing. So seeking support, so linking into a support network, thinking through how they will get the family on board with this is very important. And then also how they set the example. So if they do have a family, if there are kids, that example that you set is very important because kids will do what you do, not what you tell them to do. Especially when it comes to food, if you're introducing new foods or if you are creating a healthy eating culture in your household, kids will follow what you do. And then also prepare for challenges. So think through, depending on how much time you have, you might want to discuss how they would deal with certain social events that are coming up, how they would deal with being very busy or not having a lot of time at home if they are traveling. Thinking about those kind of challenges and how they might overcome them in advance will help and set them up for more success. And then also monitor the progress. So healthy eating is a lifelong journey, and I think we have to be very mindful of that and also be quite realistic that we need to celebrate the progress and not necessarily perfection. It is a lifelong journey. So if you are speaking to someone about portion sizes, you can make it quite practical. This isn't a perfect science, but you can use your hands to do the portion size counseling. So carbohydrates, meats and beans, a portion is the palm of the hand. You're going for something like fish or chicken, it's the size of the whole hand from the palm to the tip of the fingers. Butter is that first digit, so quite small. A fruit is the palm of the hand, and you can see the picture on the side there indicating what a portion would look like. It becomes quite important if you're doing very detailed counseling. If you just think about the different sizes of bananas that we get, using the palm of the hand as one portion can be quite helpful. For vegetables that are low in calories, you can use two hands, two palms, and then portion of cheese is a matchbox or two fingers. So you can make the advice that you give quite practical. Then, as I said, we look for simple swaps or gradual changes. So if someone is coming to you and they're drinking a beverage that's sweetened with syrup, asking them to go to a black coffee, for example. If they are drinking a lot of Coke, which can be slightly addictive, asking them to go to water, those changes are too big and they are likely to disregard the advice. So stepwise approaches often help. So first asking them maybe to not do the flavoring in the drink that they're having, and then swapping out the milk from full cream to low fat could be one way that you stepwise someone to a healthier drink. Or if they are having Coke, a midway could be a sugar-free version of that, because often it's also a texture thing. So the bubbles is something that they miss. So stepwise changes makes it a lot easier to adopt the changes. And then a note on salt. There is a lot of hidden salt in foods that we might not consider. So it's not always about the salt that you add to your foods. And some studies suggest that most of the salt that we consume during the day is actually something that's already added to the foods before we even buy it. And some of the ones that we often see this in is condiments and sauces. So it's important to check the labels here if that is a nutrient of concern. Processed and red meats, massive amounts of salt that we don't consider. A lot of our baked goods as well. So if you look at the sodium regulations that we implemented from government, they actually did it stepwise. So in 2016, we had our first wave of regulations updated that focused a lot on these baked goods like breads, crackers, etc. And then in 2019, the regulations became more strict. So they gradually phased it in, one, to help consumers get used to the taste and the changes, but also to help the manufacturers adapt to the regulations. And then a lot of our preserved foods are also sources of salt. So important to bear those in mind. That also points to the importance of cooking your meals at home. It gives you a lot more control. And then reading food labels. So the easiest way to compare foods with each other, all our labels are standardized. So you'll have 100 grams or 100 mils as the first column. And then you can look out for added sugars, sodium, and saturated fats are the ones that you'd want to limit most often. So if you're comparing two products with each other, going for the one with a lower number per 100 grams or per 100 mils, and then something you want to look at, if you're looking at high fiber, is 3 grams per 100 grams of the foods. Then something that I think will always be relevant is a budget-conscious consumer and a budget-conscious patient. So if it's not possible for them to grow their own foods, South Africans are net buyers, so we don't grow a lot of our own foods. And you can see here, making sure that it is minimally processed. That's often cheaper. So every step of the processing increases the cost. They can buy in bulk or they can plan ahead to make sure that there's not a lot of food wastage, and they can buy local and seasonally, which is also the more affordable options. And then if you have a busy lifestyle, making sure that you snack smart. So many people spend money on the snacks because they don't plan well for the snacks, so having fruits in the house or having things that can stay with you that you don't have to eat and won't squash, or things like nuts that are high in protein. Also smart snacks to keep with you at all times. Also stay hydrated. Make sure that you have a water bottle with you, because very often, especially when we're busy, we misread the signs our body give us, and we might actually be thirsty, but we interpret it as a hunger cue and we seek out food. Planning ahead, and not just meal prepping where you have the whole meal in the freezer ready to go. Something as simple as cooking rice in bulk and storing portions of that in the freezer so that the meal is quicker to put together in the end. That can also be a really helpful tip. And then being mindful when you are eating out. So look out for things like protein and fiber. Those would be better in terms of keeping you full for longer. The fiber is also much healthier. So if you look out for those when you are in a canteen making decisions, that can go a long way. So when you do need to buy something, make sure that you are taking some time to see where can I add fruits and vegetables, or what would be the higher fiber option, and is there protein in it? And then I realize I'm going a little bit over time, so I'll finish with this slide. Just to say that in the community, there are things that we can do to influence the environment that someone is in. So places like early childcare or education centers, promoting safe drinking water, having fruits and vegetables at all the meals. Also setting nutritional standards for foods that are brought on site, and also standards for what gets served to the kids are important. The same goes for schools. Teachers can also set an example here. So encouraging staff to also promote healthy behaviors is a key strategy. And then in the workplace, again, there are strategies that you can do to make healthier foods more accessible, making sure that those options are on site, taking a look at what kind of policies you have for vending machines, and also financial incentives. And then in government, I've mentioned a few of these before, but we have the health promotion levy to reduce sugar consumption, which is a really important target. We consume an enormous amount of sugar sweetened beverages, which has a huge health impact on the population. The sodium regulations I mentioned, and then we also have very important draft regulations when it comes to advertising and labeling of foodstuffs. That's currently in its draft version. All right, and with that, I'll end. Thank you so much. I think we'll go over to questions now. Dr. Breed.
Thank you so much, Carla, for that incentive. The program that give so much incentives. Thank you for giving us information on that, and thank you for your passion with which you promote a healthy lifestyle. I'm going to open up the Q&A session now, and I ask that everyone please remembers to use the function that says Q&A and not the chat function. I'm going to start us off with a question while everyone gets ready to type. So there was a slide, Carla, that mentioned the budget conscious person or consumer. So I'm glad we addressed that specific topic, but I do want to go a little bit deeper into that. Obviously, most SAMA members are within the healthcare setting, and a lot of us still see patients on a day-to-day basis. So vitality and discovery comes into play largely within the private sector. However, if we're looking at it from a public perspective, which is still the majority of the population, could you give us some advice on how to counsel those patients? The number one reason that I find for my patients why they report that they don't eat healthy is because it's more expensive to eat healthy. So, I mean, some people would debate that, but from your perspective, I'd like to ask two things. So number one, do you think that it actually is more expensive? Obviously, Vitality tries to mitigate that with all the things that you have mentioned, but on a day-to-day basis, is that something that I can try and speak to my patients and tell them, but if you look at this and this, maybe it's not. So that's the first thing. And then the second one, what are some really practical tips in terms of the food groups and specifics within those groups that we can encourage patients in the public sector to buy to try and keep the budget in mind?
Yeah. I think those are really important questions, and I think it's always going to be, it's a reality in South Africa that we have people that are food insecure. Some of the research I saw said 85% of people say that they are food secure, that they don't worry about it, but I often wonder about those kind of reports that we have. I did my community service in the Eastern Free State, so I think I am keenly aware of the realities. I saw many patients with diabetes where all I could do for them was to spread the amount of bread slices that they have throughout the day because there was just nothing else. So I understand that it's a harsh reality for a lot of people. It all depends on the context of the person. If they are able to grow anything, things like spinach is so nutrient dense and quite easy to grow. As I mentioned, we are net buyers of foods. So being able to cultivate their own gardens is really important. I know that knowledge is a big thing that needs to come and play there, but if there are practical growing tips, that would be helpful. But I think it does depend on the context and the population of what would be possible, because if someone is living in a high density populated area, then that might not be possible. If it is somewhere like Eastern Free State, there's a bit of land, so that would depend. But growing food is definitely one of the key options. The biggest thing that I've learned is it doesn't help that you start talking about all of the food groups if they report their dietary diversity to be down to 2 foods. So always listen first, make sure that you have a good understanding of what is possible for that person. Otherwise, you're going to lose them immediately. Like I said, a lot of the people I spoke to only had money for pap, marog, and then maybe meat once a month. It does depend if it's people like grants. I came across a few people that would spend money on alcohol, and then the conversation could be spending money on food and what you can buy. Pap is definitely a staple. If you have someone with diabetes, one of the things you could do is ask them to cool down the pap and reheat it, because it makes it more of a complex carb. So that does help with the release of glucose. So on a very practical tip, that's something that you can look at. But don't discount local foods and beans, dried beans, if they are at all able to buy those in bulk. If they can buy the dry ones, there are things like the Wonder Bag that can bring down the cost of making those foods. So if you can heat it on the fire and then put it in something that will maintain the heat to soften the beans even further, so that they don't have to spend a lot of money on cooking the food. That's something else that you can do. But I think we've gone through the principles of what a healthy diet is. A lot of the work that dietitians do is to then match that to the reality of the person sitting in front of them. I attended the nutrition conference this year where there was a survey done with a lot of women saying that they go hungry so that the kids can eat. So I think that's always something we're not going to solve for all of it. If there is money and you're speaking to patients about healthy diets, our logos are in stores and available to everyone. You don't need to be a Vitality member to use the label. So that will always be there to guide the general population. But in terms of how you tailor the advice, there's a lot that can be done. So speaking to dietitians, if you have access to them and explaining your population and the characteristics and challenges that they have, I think that's important because it's very hard to generalize in South Africa where we have such issues with poverty all the way up to a wealthy population. So it's always going to be a bit of a context matters kind of solution.
Amazing. Thank you so much. All right, so we have a question in the Q&A section. Let me just open it up. All right, this is more of an admin question for Sama, just to make the recording available. Do we have any other questions specifically for Carla related to the topic today? If so, please type them in the Q&A section. We'll give a few more minutes for people to just post any of their questions. All right, it doesn't seem like there are any other questions. Carla, once again, from Sama's side, thank you so much for your time and your energy and for being here with us today. We think this was a fantastic event, so necessary. And also thank you for the work that you do. It's invaluable in the healthcare setting. And I know how hard the dietitians work. So thank you so much. We really, really are grateful for you. And then for everyone else who made the time to be here. Oh, wait, we actually have a question. Just before we end off, let's quickly go on to this question. We will say all the nice things again after the question. Johan von Willich is asking, how about some sponsored educational sessions in the stores? I'm not sure if this is specifically referring to some of the grocery stores or where, but do you have any comment on educational sessions and how Vitality and Discovery makes use of these?
We haven't done any in-store. A lot of the education that we do is online because our population is so spread out. So doing something in one specific store isn't something we try and spread the impact. So a lot of our education is through newsletters, Instagram posts. The Healthy Food Studio has an Instagram. So we do a lot of the education and how to use the foods and how to eat healthy through digital ways. But we can always check with our partners if there's more to be done.
Great. Then we have a question from Valencia Paledi. They're asking, would you recommend alternating starch use for diabetics, as in eating starches on alternate days?
It depends on the treatment plan. In general, I would say no, because I do know it goes with the it's matched with the treatment. So it's best to get a dietitian involved, but carbohydrates are necessary every day for health. So I wouldn't recommend cutting that out. I know there's a lot of good being seen with low carbohydrate diets, but that still does require some carbohydrates in the diet. So not alternating it and cutting it out. No.
Fantastic. Then I see that there is a question from one of our panelists. Zianda is asking, has Vitality worked with hospitals to advise on what should be done in their cafeterias?
So we haven't since I've joined them, so I can't speak to historical, but I do know that most of the private hospitals do have dietitians and food service managers in the hospitals. The public hospitals that I've been with, it's sort of food service managers aren't everywhere, which is a pity, but a lot of the big ones do have food service managers, which would have the necessary guidelines. Yeah. I know it's not always implemented from personal experience, but yeah, I think the goal, the ambition is that they should be in the hospitals.
Amazing. Now, if there are no further questions, I'd once again like to thank Carla for her time here tonight. And then also for everyone else, thank you for joining us. I hope you have an incredible evening. And I'm sure the recording will be made available to everyone who attended. Thank you so much. Goodbye.